Hey, it's Hub. This is Video of the Damned on the Morbidly Beautiful Network. Hopefully you've had a chance to watch or listen to some of my other show, The Chamber, also on the Morbidly Beautiful Network. Had some great guests in January, which was also Giallo January. And I watched 56 Giallos in 31 days. I'm contemplating doing a whole episode just about that, maybe have some guests to talk about some of those films. There is an older Video of the Damned where we talk about what Giallo is and also some of the good films that you should check out from that genre. But it's been a while since I've just done some reviews, and so I thought I would share with you some of the titles that I've watched recently. Wonder Wheel Productions is a family-owned production company. Father John Adams, mother Toby Poser, and daughters Zelda and Lulu. And together they've made such films as The Deeper You Dig and Hellbender. Their latest, Where the Devil Roams, and it takes place in a far-off time in the past with circus sideshow freaks, a family of which gets to some homicide. Very stylized project, very ambitious. It's a road trip on the carnival circuit. It's about familial cycles, class divides, PTSD after the violence of war, and of course that undertone of Faustian bargain. This is so well put together. The Addams family does such great work. Not only the acting, of course, in front of the camera, but costumes, set design, cinematography, the music, especially the music. What they have here is something that is as beautiful as it is creepy. It's one thing for a horror film to follow the killers. It's another thing to make you sympathize for them. It's a whole nother level to make it feel like a true work of art. And that's what Wonder Wheel Productions has done again with Where the Devil Roams, available on Tubi. Let's go back a few years to look at 12-Hour Shift, starring Angela Bettis. She was the title character in Lucky McKee's May. She also was Carrie in a version of that story, and she was in Girl Interrupted. Here, she is a nurse who helps her cousin with some black market organ dealing. One night in a comedy of errors involving the cousin, her mean mob boss played by wrestling legend Mick Foley, and a serial killer played by David Arquette, our nurse protagonist has to find a way to scrounge up a new kidney quick before her 12-hour shift is over. This was written and directed by Bray Grant, a genre star who I was in a movie with called The Weathered Underground, and who has another directorial effort called Torn Hearts, which I loved when that came out about a year or so ago. This definitely has elements of horror and thriller. There's definitely some gore, but it's very comedic. It kind of reminds me of that batch of movies that came out after Pulp Fiction, that mixed comedy with noir. But I'm really only talking about, the fact that there's an ensemble and kind of a certain aesthetic and pacing that feels slightly retro in an awesome way. Honestly, overall, it's its own unique thing, and I really enjoyed it. This 12-hour shift is packed into a tidy 86 minutes that you will love. Got another movie for you about a nurse, Hell Nurse. This is written and directed by Bobby Blood, who's done quite a number of horror films, plus he's the drummer of Downset. It stars Fiona Kennedy as the caretaker for a kindly old couple, and the three of them get brutalized by a band of roving marauders. What follows is a grindhouse grinder of Argento, Carpenter, Death Wish, and I Spit on Your Grave. This is so sleazy, so gory, and so well put together. I love the costumes, I love the set design, I love the aesthetics, I love the dubbing, and of course, I love Julianne Prescott, who is a very, very mean head nurse in this film. I don't know much of the rest of the cast. It seems like a lot of their credits are Bobby Blood credits, and I don't know his other work, but I'm really interested to look into it now because he's done something really special here. This does feel like an artifact of the 1970s. It's gonna make you squirm, but it's so worth it, and it's only like 71 minutes. So go to hell. Hell Nurse, that is. If you're not familiar with Eddie Lengyel, he is a Cleveland-based writer, director, and producer, and sometimes actor, who has done a lot of micro-budget horror And a lot of it has featured Roger Connors, who was recently on my podcast, The Chamber. And Roger does star in this one as well, The Sluagh Awakens. And it's a bit of Irish mythology, but not like the Leprechaun series. This actually is more like Bigfoot meets zombies. There's actually a lot jammed into this movie, and we'll talk about that. But Roger here plays kind of a Wall Street bro with his wife, who they're visiting the country to celebrate a big win of his in the stock market. And, well, tragedy strikes with what is dismissed as a wild animal, but locals know is more closely related to the myth of the Sluagh. And this danger pokes its head out again when some kids get together to have a good time, and they're clashing with Roger here, who is back to avenge the attack that he suffered. I'll be honest with you, there's a whole lot of characters in this. It's a pretty big ensemble, and some of the mythology gets confusing. I wasn't sure if there was one Sluagh or multiple Sluagh. At some points, there's magical flutes. Sometimes it's the victims becoming undead. It's unique and entertaining, but confusing, and the ending feels a little bit rushed. I just read an interview with Lengyel where he says this was supposed to have been a family-friendly fairy movie, and it ended up on, quote, the opposite end of the spectrum. Also, there was some reshoots, some lost footage. It sounded like it might have been a troubled production. But the finished product has some fun acting moments, some quirky story moments, and that ended up being true of a lot of Lengyel work that I then delved into. This most recent Christmas, I had watched Lengyel's Mother Krampus 2, Sleigh Ride. Doesn't actually have anything to do with the Mother Krampus series, but it had that title slapped on there by a distributor. And Roger Connors had contributed a lot of script elements, and there was new footage shot that was added to existing film. He talks about this on Dark Night of the Podcast, which he hosts with Troy Escamilla. What you end up getting with the final product is a unique kind of twist on the Black Christmas kind of vibe. I won't tell you much more than that because you should go find out for yourself. It's not a whodunit, though. You know who the killer is within the first 5 minutes of the film. Roger has a great turn in here as a drag queen named Lady Athena Slay. And again, there's some other great actors in this. I love the casting that happens in these Lengyel movies. For example, Caitlin E. Newberry, I've come to adore her. She stars in American Poltergeist, The Curse of Lilith Ratchet. So let's try to explain this story. There's a local legend attached to a shrunken head, which you throw around like in a hot potato game while telling a nursery rhyme that recounts the legend of Lilith Ratchet. And a paranormal investigator who hosts a podcast is looking into it with a group of college kids who are throwing a party. Again, Lengyel just weaves these wild stories with these ensemble casts, but he explores the relationships between the characters. There are emotional stakes. Now, this one, Lilith Ratchet, it was made and came out some years before Natty Knox, but there are some similarities between the two movies, and they both have that similar retro vibe, but not retro 70s or 80s, retro like early 2000s. But again, not a bad thing. Again, there's just this pacing and aesthetic and storytelling that feels like early to mid 2000s supernatural horror. Now, I felt this was the best of the Lengyel movies I watched, and that seemed to be the critical consensus, online audience consensus, but I haven't really discussed that viewpoint with anybody who has worked on these movies or has starred in these movies. But I'm saying it feels like Lengyel was firing on all cylinders here, like he caught lightning in a bottle. I would also say that Lengyel movies feel very bleak to me. They're not necessarily happy endings. Your darlings are not necessarily going to make it out alive. And nowhere is that more true than Voodoo Rising, which definitely comes from the same blueprint as Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Last House on the Left. It's kind of what you would trace House of a Thousand Corpses back to, but this is Louisiana flavored. This is Southeastern fried. It's got the conversations about Mercury retrograde. It's a van full of kids picking up a hitchhiker. There is a Friday the 13th style doomsayer as well. And they are going camping. The ending is even very House of Thousand Corpses. However, besides these tropes and familiar elements, it does tell its own Lengyel wild story, weaving a whole bunch of different characters and agendas. and keeping you guessing about who's on what side and what's going to happen, who's going to survive. This definitely felt like a throwback to 70s and 80s, and the dialogue is not politically correct. I would say you couldn't get away with this today, but this film isn't really that old. It came out like a couple years ago. But show it to a friend and tell them that it's a long-lost 1983 movie, and I'm sure they would believe you. And that's what I dig about these Lengyel movies. He's going for a vibe with each movie. He's carving out his niche in that subgenre, and he's decorating it with his ensemble of characters and his particulars and peculiarities to the story. I think these are fun films to watch either on your own or with a group of friends, and you definitely can get away with doing some double features, some marathons. The guy knows how to hook you. And he's got some talented actors to help with that, and some great kills and practical effects. So give Eddie a chance, will you? I hope you enjoyed this video roundup on Video of the Damned. There's also a video review of The Seeding that is up here on the Morbidly Beautiful Network. You can check that out. And I do hope to circle back to that January giallo that I talked about, but I want to give a special shout out and a happy birthday to my favorite Italian leading lady, Megan Marie. So until next time, find me on social media at Brody Hubbard. Keep tuning into the Morbidly Beautiful Network. Check out The Chamber, and join us next time on Video of the Damned. I remain Hub.